Trinny Woodall has admitted she has not yet ventured back into the world of dating since her split from multi-millionaire businessman Charles Saatchi earlier this year, claiming she is simply too abusy to embark on, or even find, a new romance. The 59-year-old fashion expert and beauty entrepreneur is believed to have parted ways with Charles, now 80, earlier this year following a 10-year relationship. Now, speaking exclusively to Celebrity Updates, Trinny revealed she hasn't even thought about meeting someone new as she's simply been too busy expanding her successful beauty brand Trinny London, while conceding that the world of dating is probably very different than it was when she was last looking for love. I think the world of dating, which I have yet to go into, because there's been a lot going on in the past few months, is very different, and many people who maybe dated before. Dating is quite different now, she said. So if you're dating through the internet or you're dating in person, there's an issue of appearances can be different, so there's lots of things to think about. She continued. Trinny Woodall has admitted she's not had time to date recently and thinks it's important to understand the relationship within ourselves. The 52-year-old fashion expert has been busy expanding her beauty empire and also released her book Fearless this year. When asked if she would ever turn to dating apps to find a man, Trinny replied, "I haven't even thought about it, but I have some really good friends of mine who have married people they met on online dating. Where they met them and how they met them was irrelevant. It was the quality of the person they met. So I think maybe it's not putting undue importance to that entry level of how you begin to date somebody, but just what they're like." However, Trinny certainly doesn't appear to be in a rush to enter a new relationship and argued it's important to be happy on your own first. There's a lot of feeling as women today, of the evolution of how we feel about women and what completes us, as opposed to what's a lovely add-on in our life, she explained. So, I feel that the more we can really understand the relationship within ourselves, the more we get into a place of feeling really happy with who we are as a person, and then everything else is an add-on. Trinny continued, "But if we go into a relationship hoping that it will make us feel better about ourselves, it's harder to achieve, so I think doing that work first is the most important bit of work. What can I do to just up myself? Because then you also give out an energy, which is different, and maybe then also you attract a different person into your life." It was first reported in March that Trinny's relationship with Charles had ended, with friends suggesting the 21-year age gap between them was to blame for them going their separate ways. Earlier this year, Trinny revealed to podcaster Elizabeth Day, "I have been in a relationship for 10 years, and whatever people choose to believe or read, I know I have been in love with the person I was in a relationship with, and I had good years in that relationship. But I also know that I got to a stage where I knew I was not happy in it, and that's a very tough thing, because a relationship becomes familiar." She added, "Oddly, I never thought I'm scared to be on my own. That's something that didn't occur to me at all. It was more, do I feel quite on my own in the relationship? And I did. I got to a stage where I felt on my own. So then in the end, it was about, okay, I have the power to do what I want to do. So I just then thought, okay, I'm going to move on." And it was difficult because any change is difficult. Prior to her relationship with Charles, Trinny was married to businessman Johnny Elichaoff from 1999 until 2009 and gave birth to their daughter Lila in 2003. Johnny, who also had a son, Zach, from a previous relationship, took his own life in 2014 at the age of 55, a tragedy that Trinny says she only began to grieve in earnest years later when her daughter Lila left home. Although he was known to have suffered a series of failed oil investments before his death, Trinny said he was going through such turmoil that he'd convinced himself his children were better off without him, despite his hypervigilance over their welfare. Speaking on the Diary of a CEO podcast, the beauty mogul shared, Johnny had hypervigilance around his children because he had been in the Israeli army and he was a paramedic, and he had from it post-traumatic stress disorder, which wasn't diagnosed until about 20 years later. But one of the things also is hypervigilance around his children, so he was always so worried for their welfare. So you kind of have this thing of where do you get to in your brain when you are so worried about your children that you can convince yourself that the best thing for your children, who you love profoundly, is that you're not in their life anymore? And that is something that is so important that we can help people who get to that situation, that they don't get to that final part of that situation. It's understanding what to recognize, and it's very hard to recognize. I didn't recognize. There were lots of details of it which could have really upset me of things that were done wrong, but you kind of have to let go. You need to work through these stages and not get stuck in something which eats you up. She added, every person who has had somebody commit suicide will at some stage say, was there anything I could have done to stop it? Although the pair were divorced when Johnny passed away, Trinny noted that the pair of them still spoke every day on the phones, adding that she couldn't truly begin to get to grips with her grief for some time because her former spouse had left a mess when he died, which she needed to deal with. Probably oddly, I moved in March, and that was the first time I remember Lila went away. And it was the first time in 35 years I'd been on my own in the house, and I grieved for Johnny all those years later, she shared. I suppose you need space. He died, there was a mess, then starting the business. I was living in a house I couldn't afford to live in. I had to sell it for lots of reasons, one of them for that reason. There were so many sort of fires I was dealing with, trying to guide Lila to be okay. So there were a lot of years of that.